Hi there. A couple of weeks ago, I jumped on a Zoom with a long-standing member of my group. He told me where he's investing and why. He told me about a place that's attracting freedom-loving people from across the world, people who are drawn by low taxes, economic opportunity, personal freedoms. He told me about a place where even today we can buy a new condo in a shiny luxury tower from $60,000. And this is a place that's an absolute energy powerhouse. It's an agricultural powerhouse. I'm heading there now, heading to my gate. Watch our conversation and then subscribe, follow along, and I'll keep you posted from my trip. Hi, Kurt. Lovely to see you.
Hey there, Ronan. How are you?
Good, good, good. Where am I speaking to you?
I just arrived for a week in Austin, Texas. I haven't been in the US for a while, so I'll be here for a week in Austin, next week in Arizona, and then over to Europe.
Oh, good, 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 great stuff. So, Kurt, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and jumping on with me today. So, Kurt is a long-standing RETA member, and like all of us on the RETA team and so many fellow RETA members, he's out there putting boots on the ground in a whole bunch of different and exciting locations, in search of opportunity. And I guess, Kurt, you've also built very much an international and internationalized life around your real estate investments, etc. But Kurt, before we dive in about a recent scouting trip you're recently back from Paraguay, which is a place I've never been, which I'm fascinated. And as soon as I heard you were putting boots on the ground, I was really, really anxious to speak to you about it. But before we dive in and talk about what brought you to Paraguay and what you found in Paraguay, what I think would be very helpful would be if you could share with fellow RETA members just how your criteria for entering a deal, your expected returns from that deal, and then your criteria for exiting. Because I've observed in our conversations how really kind of ruthless and dedicated you are to your exit windows, that the when an opportunity gets to a point where you don't expect to see future returns at a certain level, you exit.
Yeah, sure. Happy to share some of that thinking and evolving thinking, Ronan. So really, over the last 5 years, as we've I think discussed before, so my so-called pandemic project began on June 20th of 2020. So I was living in Northern California at the time, working for one of the big high-tech companies and flying to Germany about once a month. But once the world said you can't go to work anymore, and after 90 days of that, I was kind of bored and frustrated, said, okay, I'll change my tax residency to a better place than California, which was Texas. And then I jumped on a plane, which was pretty empty, and headed up to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, was my first stop on the journey. But what I was looking for at that time, and I've refined the criteria a bit, but I was looking for places in the world that had the weather that I enjoyed. Being originally from Canada, I think I like a little bit cooler weather and drier weather. So part of it was for personal use, but more importantly was approaching this as a business. And so where was there, as you have talked about many times, a path of progress? Where is there a place that already many people know about? Um, Emerging still. I'm an innovation guy by career, so I'm always trying to do the next big thing that might be 5 or 7 years in the future. And if I look at history, that seems to be the case. So I was looking for places around the world and a certain number of properties to be able to diversify. So I was looking for, 10 or 12 to start, and based on my personal finances and available liquidity, I was looking at. I found RETA at the time because I was also looking for a price point that was in the, at that time, 250,000 US dollar to $350,000 US range. And in my first 8 or 10 or 12 properties, most of those have been in that range. There's one outlier on the lower side and one outlier above that, but most of those have been concentrated in that area. And what I'm looking for is, I really, really, really want cash flow from month number one, positive cash flow when I receive the property. And so the question is, how long do I want to wait to receive the property? And so my first few purchases were, my desire is to buy basically have a balance between some properties that I can start monetizing within 0 to 6 months. So places like Singular Dream, places like Adega in Lagos, places like Casares in Spain. These are all from when I put my first money down to monetizing them was only about 6 months. And then I also invest kind of like a bond ladder. I'm also investing in, pre-construction that are going to take 2 years or 3 years. And so ideally there's a new property coming online. And then after my exit criteria, so one step back. So cash flow positive is clear and simple, I think. I personally have been managing my own international vacation rentals for, believe it or not, over 20 years. I use technology, which is my background, and processes and repeatability and local people, some local boots on the ground to be able to achieve that without spending between 10% and 35% in property management fees. I've seen that kind of range. I just talked to someone yesterday at Singular Dream about that. They didn't even realize they were spending 35% on property management fees, and I'm spending 0. So my numbers are better than theirs. So anyway, so I'm ideally looking for greater than 10%, cash on cash, or I think you call it gross rents, right? So based on my annualized rents, based on the purchase price, it's over 10%, and I'm seeing even a lot around 15%. So that is my sweet spot. Underneath that, I have to question, the cash flow versus the appreciation side. And then lastly, I think you're asking about exit. So yeah, I want to remain flexible and realize that these properties are, for me, occasional use, just a bit. Maybe a few weeks per year. I try to visit every place at least once a year. Some places are more favorable than others based on that weather I mentioned. But if there's a new construction across the street, or there's an overbuild in the macro economics or something on the downside, then I want to assess. Is am I going to be able to keep generating that 10+% gross rents, or should I exit? And then there's also the element of, if you've had a property, in my mind, for 7-ish years and it's appreciated, then that's really a good approximate time frame to think about, letting someone else own it. Because maybe maybe the decorating is needed to be changed, the furniture, maybe the air conditioning needs some significant maintenance, and then you've probably appreciated enough that your equity in that property, if you look at the cash flow on equity kind of score, it's more efficient to take that equity and put it into 2 or 3 or 4 new properties rather than just keep it in that one. So I just sold 2 of my properties this year that I had bought in December. I'd seen for the first time in December 2020, January 2021, during the pandemic, before the vaccines were invented. And that was in Portugal and Spain. And I had to navigate the streets secretly, because you weren't allowed to drive or do dangerous things like drive off the freeways back then on city streets. But I just exited those 2 for different reasons. But one was a 53, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, I believe 53% gain, and one was about a 60% gain in 3-year time frame. 3 years of cash flow positive to rentals. For example, Lagos, it was my top performing property, but I decided for a few reasons it was time to move on, and now I'm closing a sale this coming Tuesday in Estepona, up the street in Costa del Sol. So, so long meandering answer, but I hope I touched on kind of what my criteria is, the kind of numbers I'm looking at, and then the exit. But happy to go deeper on any area you think is helpful, Ronan.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the exit is really key, and to a large extent, one of the reasons that maybe I don't dig on that as much in RETA as maybe I'd like to is that there's such a personal component to it because, is this a place you've personal attachment to? You've built up an infrastructure. What other opportunities are on your plate? But I think it's refreshing to your willingness to I won't even say cut loose, but to to take those steps to put in the work to release that capital and reallocate it. Another thing, Kurt, that I've heard you say and that really kind of resonated with me in terms of this internationalized life is being able to just drop into different places and having an established community. And, that's a thing I strongly urge fellow RETA members to do. When I arrive in Cabo at the tail end of the year, I'll have texted my golf buddies, I'll have my golf lined up, I'll have all this stuff ready to go so that when I land, I'm plugged in. And that really makes the journey so much easier and rewarding. But Paraguay, why did you go? How did you get there? What did you find? Um, tell all.
Yes. So this was my third trip to Paraguay and focusing on the capital city, Asunción. I first Paraguay was not on my radar until part of my digital nomad life, spending time in Playa del Carmen. So I have a property, 100 steps to the beach at Singular Dream, fantastic location. Um, and as I was spending some time there, I met some people in the expat community, some people from RETA, some people outside of RETA that introduced me to the Critical Thinkers Club.
Mm.
Maybe it's like your golf buddies, but
Yeah.
the Critical Thinkers Club who meet on Monday night at a certain restaurant slash bar in Playa del Carmen. So I joined this a couple of times and started being educated by people that have been thinking about global tax optimization and what they would call probably a plan B country, just in case, something goes wrong in your home country that you don't like, and you want a different place to be able to go. So I started reading up and learning about Paraguay, and the things I heard were quite compelling. So before I went, you know, again, you can look on the map in Paraguay. Most people don't know where Paraguay is. It's not on the coast. It's one of the two countries, I think, in South America that are landlocked. Um, but I learned that they were part of it was easy to immigrate there. It was easy to get residency. The tax system is quite favorable, is growing. They're a energy and food rich country. They have a very large hydroelectric dam on the river bordering Brazil and Argentina. Brazil buys 20% of their power from Paraguay, and Argentina buys 10% of their power from Paraguay. So it's kind of operating at a surplus, and they're net exporter of food. And the residency was very easy at the time. They had just introduced the concept of a temporary residency when I first heard about it, but it's literally 2 years and you can get a permanent residency. Reason that's interesting. So I got my temporary residency. So let me just, before I explain my trip, let me explain the reason.
Mm.
Those are the things that attracted me, and the affordability. I heard was amazingly low, and I'm a frugal guy originally from Canada, and I appreciate deals. And for me, that's part of the game, is finding, using points on airlines or finding the right deal, and just playing the strategy games. So I thought that sounded interesting. So I did talk to a gentleman who is taking people down to Paraguay and clients from other parts of the world to Paraguay, kind of on a 5-day trip to get them through this process. And so I started, here's a guy named Mark, originally from Montreal. So I started talking to him. We did some preparatory work with paperwork, basically a background check, a crime check for your last 20 years, and a couple things like that. And then literally once I went to Paraguay, I had my temporary residency in within 13 hours, 13 hours,
Wow.
at a pretty affordable price as well. And that unlocks the Mercosur countries, which, if I'm sure you're familiar with Mercosur is, but essentially South America's version of the EU, and they're adding countries. Recently, I think Panama joined. So once you have residency in one of those Mercosur countries, which Paraguay is part of, then you can move between those 8 or 9 countries without any time limits. You don't have to worry about leaving to reset your visa or anything like that. You can stay in the country, and you start to have some future benefits. So those kind of things kind of all attracted me to Paraguay, and it's a bit south, so it's not as far south maybe as Uruguay. It's close, but to get there, yeah, I'd have connected through probably Panama the first time, and usually, Panama is quite the hub for South America. Um, so yeah, that's how I guess first heard about Paraguay, and headed down there in January of 2024. So about 18 months ago was my first trip.
And when you landed, like, what did you find? So what did you find aesthetically, economically, security? Is it at altitude? Is this I when I think of, is it high in the Andes?
Yeah. So yeah. When I first landed, so even though Asunción is a big and now faster growing city than even when I first arrived 18 months ago, but I think it's approximately 3.5 million people in the capital city
Wow.
area, which is the population of the entire country of Uruguay, by the way.
Yeah.
So it's in
Yeah.
one city that no one knows about, which is interesting.
Mm,
Small airport, very easy to traverse the airport. One thing that impacted me still to this day, 18 months later, is I walked out of the airport, and I saw basically a food cart outside of the airport. And my kryptonite is pastries. I quite enjoy pastries around the world. So as I walk out of the airport, I see a food cart with pastries, these round bagel-like things, which I now know are called chipas. So I asked the gentleman in Spanish, how much they were, cuánto, and with my limited Spanish. And I did not have any local currency yet, which, by the way, are called guaranis. And that's also one of the two official languages, Guarani and Spanish. It's a bilingual country, and Guarani is the native, language. So I asked the gentleman, cuánto, and he tells me, 5,000, Guarani. And so I pull out my handy, my smartphone, and with which I use, Google Translate a lot as I travel the world. But
yeah.
and I pull out my XE, my conversion
Yeah.
tool. I'm like, okay, so 5,000 Guarani is 60 cents US dollars, 60
Yeah.
cents for this
Yeah.
pastry. So
Wow.
I didn't have local currency. I handed a $1 US, and I just started to walk away, and he's like, "Senor, senor," and he gives me change of 2,000 Guarani change, and I'm
Yeah.
like, this blew my mind. I'm like, this might be an ethical place, because this
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
nowhere did I expect in the world if I give a US dollar I'll get changed, but he actually
Yeah.
gives me 2,000 local currency change. It was very tasty, and I was optimistic about the people, which was reinforced as I spent my first week there and went to malls. And there's so I got in an Uber. They have Uber there. The prices have gone up in the last 18 months, I noticed last week. So Bolt, B-O-L-T, which is,
Yeah.
some people see it in some countries, it's literally 25% of the price of Uber, so way cheaper.
Wow.
Bolt. So Bolt and Uber back in the day, 18 months ago, you can move anywhere around the city, this 3.5 million person city of Asuncion, anywhere from left to, east to west to north to south, for under $2. So between $1 and $2 US.
Wow.
so very cheap, which again I appreciate that. I stayed at a normal hotel the first time. I'm a Marriott guy over the decades, so I stayed at a loft hotel, which was very
Mm.
affordable, like $40 a night. And
Wow.
I might have used points. It is right beside the top attraction of of Asunción, which is strangely, I'll explain why I learned this trip, why. Basically, there's two major shopping malls. One is called Shopping del Sol, and then there's one that's called Mariscal. They're both about 20 or 30 years old. And then across the street, there's a newer one across from Del Sol. But the Aloft is right beside Del Sol. And these are super five-star. You walk through the mall, it's marble everywhere. It's international brands, American brands, European brands, super clean, families everywhere, super safe. People spending money, everything operating efficiently, and people are working hard, but the systems work. Some parts of the world we go to,
Mm.
maybe the business systems are not working the same way, or and things are
Yeah.
maybe a slower pace of life in Paraguay, but they work, and people are safe and family oriented. And I loved it. Just, I guess, one thing about the malls that I learned this time on my most recent trip is, why if you look at the map of Asuncion, there's basically a river on the west side, which is kind of the border. Then you have the old downtown, which is where the government offices are. So if you're doing immigration work or residency work, you're going to go there. You'll pay your $1.50 to Uber or Bolt and go down there. It's pretty quiet at night, so most people do not stay there. I have some friends that experimented by staying overnight, and there's not much to see or do right now because
Mm.
it's kind of an empty city when the offices close. So most of the happening stuff is a bit east around these malls. Um, so anyway, so there's the river, there's the downtown, the old town, if you will. There's the new shopping area, and then the digital nomad area and expat area is a bit south of that. They don't necessarily want to be at the mall, but in these more bohemian, quiet city streets that have 50 or 60 or 100 bars and restaurants, but more quiet and not so many skyscrapers, because there are skyscrapers and office and buildings being built near those malls. And then if you go a bit east, again, there's the airport, and then some developing area where there's more local Paraguayan purchasing happening. But the reason the mall, and then I'll stop talking. The reason the malls are interestingly the centers of the Asuncion. I heard I met people this trip that had moved to Asuncion 40 years ago, so from France, and they're like, "Yeah, we moved here 40 years ago. There were cows in the street in this Asuncion.
Yeah.
3.5 million people. There's cows in the street 40 years ago."
Wow.
And then 20-ish years ago, they built some malls because there was sewage in the street, which isn't very pleasant to walk around sewage in the street. So some enterprising developers decided, let's build a clean place called a mall, and let's make sure that there's no sewage in the mall, and you could go walk there and socialize there and walk your dog there and exercise there. And so now, interestingly, Asuncion goes out from these two malls because they were clean places 20 years ago. But then the developers started noticing, the smart money, I guess, smarter money than me, noticed
Mm.
about 10 years ago the opportunity. So I met multiple developers who came from Santiago, Chile, who came from Buenos Aires, Argentina, and have been building basically the empires there. Like, they are the leading developers
Mm.
now, and they're doing 10 or 20 projects at the same time. So it's been accelerating a lot. And just in the 18 months since I was there, I've noticed a lot of construction, more people, but lots of nomads, lots of people from North America, lots of Europeans actually, and very friendly people. Again, safe as I have never felt. Yeah, I've never felt uncomfortable. I like walking. I prefer not to
Mm.
drive around. I have not rented a car yet. I got my driver's license this time though, so I do have a driver's
Mm.
license in Paraguay. So I'll drive next time as I go to some other cities to the east and to the south. But so far I've been focused on Asuncion, so I've been taking Bolt and Uber and walking.
Was that an automatic process to get your driver's license, or did you need to do some kind of test?
Yes. So if you talk to the immigration people or residency people, or like, kind of the strategy is, if you're intending to go towards citizenship and a passport,
Mm,
then you want to show examples of how you're committed and serious about the country and not just trying to get a piece of paper. So opening a bank account, getting a tax ID and opening a bank account. I got the tax ID this time. I failed to open my bank account. I ran out of time. I did show that I'm serious by getting a driver's license. And yes, there's local tests. There's people that can help you also with these tests. And then I got my national ID this time. That's the big thing that everyone wants, the cedula. Once you get the
mm.
cedula, it's, that's you show that everywhere, and it's your national ID, and it's a kind of a prerequisite for everything else. And I started in an analog way 18 months ago with ink fingerprints. Unfortunately, there was a glitch in my paperwork from Canada, where I'm originally from, when the RCMP sent my crime-free 20-year report, even though I don't even live in Canada. And they put an American address on the paperwork,
Oh,
which caused confusion, because why,
yeah.
and so I had to restart that. And now I missed the analog opportunity, so now it's digital. So the reason that's important is you have to maybe make an extra trip now to Paraguay, because you can't leave your ink fingerprints behind for someone to submit. You have to put your hands on a
Yeah.
digital
True.
scanner. So you might need to take one extra trip now instead of one trip. Yeah.
And these new projects by the big Argentine and other international
Hmm.
groups, so are those targeted at a new local middle class, or are these foreign buyers, or who's buying them, and what price per foot are they selling for?
Yeah. So the majority. So I actually had a dinner with a developer and a member of the government. So I had arranged
Mm,
a meeting to talk to both of them about that question. So definitely, the const night I'd say 80% of the construction happening now, especially near the malls area, the new area near Shopping Del Sol and Mariscal, are targeted towards international residents. So they're actually a bit too expensive for middle class, Paraguayans that are working, white collar workers. The government worker I was having dinner with, he told me what price he can afford for an apartment, which is basically between 600 and 900 US dollars a month, is what a kind of 40-year-old,
mm,
42-year-old white collar government worker can afford. And it's too expensive. But if you look on the global stage, it's quite affordable. If you want to buy um, basically a studio, you could. Actually put money down this time on a one-bedroom apartment, but you can get a studio for literally. I have a price rate in front of me here, brand new, 2 blocks from the Mariscal Mall, which is the mall that's in the more bohemian,
mm.
quieter area, little loft apartments, or um, studios, 46,000 US dollars, 46,000. One bedroom starts at 60,000, and then two bedrooms from 100,000. And I've seen
Wow.
those kinds of prices, the kind of 40-ish, 70 for one bedroom, and 100, 128 for two bedroom, depending again how high you are. But that's the starting price. But so yeah, a lot of people are buying that from international, and a lot of money from Argentina before the recent political change. Some people want to invest into more stable economies than, or places that have a different currency. So now again, there's some more optimism in Argentina now than there was before the recent election there.
Mm,
So there's some hope, but a lot of Argentinian money came in, but a lot of money from U.S. and Canada and Europe. And then there's one more thing. By that Shopping Del Sol, it's right across the street from the Asunción World Trade Center. So the World Trade Center is also there. You can walk across the street. And so there are business travelers coming to Asunción. It's not hasn't classically been a tourist destination because there's no ocean or beach. But again, it is an attraction to nomads and international, and business people. And there's plans to now develop, the river region on the west side, which has been kind of overlooked because it's beside the old town. But I saw multiple plans to develop that area. And then they built, last year, they opened a new bridge, a second bridge. So there's two bridges across the river now to the west side, which makes it very easy to go over, to the border. But now there's a place called Nueva Asunción on the west side of the river, which is now for the first time since last year accessible in 10 minutes from downtown. And there's a lot of people
Wow.
land banking there now.
Yeah.
So the price, so basically the price points for land, everyone talks in square meters there, not square feet, but in the land in the prime areas is about 1,000. So for land alone is
Mm.
$1,000 per square meter. If you go to the west side of the river where the land banking is, and it's not developed yet, but now just 10 minutes away, I've heard prices definitely around $50. Uh,
What?
yes, 50 versus 1,000, correct.
Jeez.
And even cheaper. Even if you
Yeah.
some places even $10, it's preposterous. $10 to $50
Yeah.
per square meter versus 1,000 where they're building the skyscrapers now. Um, and then the construction, once you look at the construction, the per square meter and everyone's the real estate market is very, very hot there right now. So everyone's maybe over hot a bit in the international, luxury or the
Mm.
condo markets. But you're starting to see some new product as well and some interesting mixes I'll mention in a sec. But you see generally if pre-construction from around 1,500 per square meter. But
Yeah.
by the time it's under construction or delivery, then it's really 2,000 to 2,200 per square meter. So there is that.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's about a
Sure.
50% rise during the construction, which is taking like usually 2 to 3 years.
And
But
are those prices denominated, two-part question, are those prices denominated in dollars? And are you legally allowed flip? And is there a flipping market? And is there a flipping business?
yeah, so majority of these, because these buildings are all targeted towards international owners, they're using US dollars for their pricing and references. And if you talk to property management people that are running Airbnbs, they will usually give you US dollars. Um, and as for a flipping, you can certainly so there is some developer financing concepts, which is
Mm.
nice. Well, there's certainly during the construction, it's very common. You might need to put 20. Usually they like around 10 or 20% down payment near the beginning, similar to some of the RETA deals, right? I put $1,000 down to hold my spot. By the way, I was there I learned about this opportunity a couple of days before they launched, but when they launched, they wanted to, they had 128 units in the building, 8 floors. Again, this is the two or three blocks from that shopping. They wanted to sell 100 units the first day. Somehow they got 131 reservations, and I have to ask them about
Wow.
that because there's only 128 properties. I'm not sure how
Yeah.
they got 131 reservations. But yeah, and then within a couple weeks, you have to put 20% down, and then you
Yeah.
pay during. They're a little bit. Some developers are more flexible than others in how much you can pay. By the time construction is complete, then need to pay the rest. They don't seem yet to have been asked, some of the special RETA magic questions about,
Mm.
providing financing after the fact. I think they're definitely open to that and happy to talk to you about that. In terms of flipping, if we say reselling, yes, that's a thing, and it's possible. There's no limitations that I saw. I know the taxes are pretty reasonable. One of the reasons that attracts me to Paraguay is the tax situation. If you have international income and you bring it into the country, into your bank, they don't tax you on that. Anything outside of the country is out of bounds. If you do local revenue generation through Airbnbs or other things, it seems to be about 10% income tax, which is pretty reasonable. I'm going to get a bit smarter on the capital gains side. I'll look that up. But property tax is like 1%, and it's pretty affordable, as I mentioned before. So, but I'll check into the kind of the capital gains question. I don't know off the
Yeah.
top of my head what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. And so does it feel hot and frenzied? it seems like very, very strong sales at launches. Does it feel like a market that's frenzied or just solid, or where would you put it on that spectrum?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of in the city itself some regionalization emerging. So I'd say it's pretty frenzied around the malls, those areas I've been talking about.
Mm,
And you see some super skyscraper projects like 55-story, and they've just announced there's a little bit like other parts of the world, I'm gonna have the tallest tower in the
yeah.
continent, or I'll be on the top three list of the continent. So there is one of those that's on the list. I think it'll be number three or number four in South America
Mm,
that they are just breaking ground, and they're getting really solid builders there, though. The people that have built like the Burj Khalifa in Dubai that are doing the
wow.
foundation, so they're getting high quality construction and architects and such. But there's a couple of those that I think it might be over hot. But what they're learning is so two things. You asked a bit about, I think, middle class or
Mm,
local Paraguayans. So as I met with the government workers and validated this with different people, there is so far a shortage of middle class condos. There haven't been any middle class condos. So there's an opportunity to invest in new condo projects that are specifically targeting, white collar Paraguayans themselves. So there's a few projects. A few developers are also now starting to build like a multi-tower concept where, and I'm looking to buy into one of these as well. And it's closer to completion, which matches my criteria of getting cash flowing something rather than waiting just 2 or 3 years. But there's two towers, the residential, and there's a third tower that's almost already complete. That's an office tower. I'll come back to that. And then underneath, a very nicely designed retail restaurant space with over 30 or 40 different restaurants, including my favorite restaurant down there. So I'm excited about that. And it's
mm,
literally 50 steps to one of those malls. It's right across the street. But that concept of office space, although we're probably, if we've been in London or, Los Angeles or New York or wherever in the world, Tokyo, office buildings, pandemic or no pandemic, people are going back to offices. Yes, commercial real estate was difficult, but in Asunción, they never had office buildings before. So this is kind of strange.
wow.
They don't have office buildings. So now for the first time, they're actually building office buildings because there's a massive shortage of office buildings. And so some smart developers are combining residential with office, and now with 40 restaurants underneath, you could live there and work there. And so that's emerging now, both back closer to the river and the older part of town, and some now around Mariscal shopping, and then a few more a bit to the east near some more green. It's a pretty green town, actually. When you go around, it's very green, which is nice. So there's an opportunity there for middle class and the mixed residential office space that I think is probably a better return on investment than the direct, all these skyscrapers right in the middle of town. Because I'm not sure what's going to happen there. My rule is I'm trying to be 2 blocks to the malls, and the World Trade
Yeah.
Center is my primary, and then I'm looking towards that downtown part that's emerging, and then across the river to the empty canvas of Nueva Ascension. That's a place where middle class people will buy as well, and there's plans to build whole subdivisions out there, but it hasn't broken ground yet, so it's very virgin opportunity out there.
Yeah. And I mean, those price points are so low. I mean, one wonders how they can even be built for that type of price. And then the higher end, the mega skyscrapers, do you know what price per foot or meter those are coming in at?
Yeah, some of those. I'll have to look that up. I do have some resales. Most of these buildings, if not all these buildings, are completely sold out. But one of
Yeah.
those skyscrapers, I did talk and look at some resales. There's a few resales happening, but they're not extreme. These are still in the hundred, under 200,000 range for sure.
Yeah.
I put my money down on the top floor, so of that one that starts at, I mentioned, starts at 70,000, was on the bottom floor, and the top floor is 75 65,000. So sorry, starts ground floor is 60,000, and
Mm,
the eighth floor um, was 74,000. So I paid 74,000 to have a top floor. I like eastern facing. I like morning sun
yeah.
and an open space, so a new building can't be built in front of that view. So I'm paying 74,000 for
And
a
what
penthouse.
what size?
That one's a little bit small. It's being optimized for Airbnb. So the one bedroom is
Mm,
a little bit small, 40 square meters. The two
okay.
bedroom is quite a bit larger. It's almost double. It's like 70 something square meters.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
there are a lot of the buildings I looked at were I did notice because in my brain I think 100 square meters in Europe in my mind means a three-bedroom house.
Yeah.
There were a lot of 100 square meter places that were only two bedrooms, so pretty sizable, and they all have a balcony. Barbecuing is very important in Paraguay, so they almost all come with a barbecue on the terrace because on the weekends it's very common for families to get together and barbecue. And then there's all common areas. There's very nice amenities in all these places. They know you need to have a gym. They almost all have a rooftop pool. I would say they all have a rooftop pool, nice gyms, as well as common areas, co-working spaces. That's common everywhere. Again, they're catering to the international customer primarily.
And in terms of Airbnb, what type of yields are you anticipating?
Yeah, so I think that there again you have to be wise and run the numbers beforehand
Yeah.
to understand. And again, proximity to those places I think are important. I've seen the yields, Airbnb, basically, 6% to double digits. You can get double digits, but you have to be smart. You're not going to automatically get a double digit
Mm,
percentage yield. But basically, I spent a lot of time with one of the leading Airbnb management companies there, and he showed me a lot of data, and they're getting, 70, 80% occupancy, even with all the building. So 70, 80%
mm,
occupancy and between 60 and 90 US dollars a night. Um, and then for some outliers like three bedrooms, which you can get a three-bedroom place. I looked at that. I can buy a three-bedroom literally looking at the Del Sol shopping mall,
mm.
top floor. So penthouse, Del Sol shopping, three-bedroom, for $250,000. And it's making a lot of money. Yeah, so it's doing like 12%, yield. So that's interesting to me. Yeah.
And so is this a place you could see yourself kind of scaling up and having a, a bunch of these small Airbnb units? Or and just to kind of close that off,
Yeah.
are you mostly drawn because of the tax and lifestyle benefits and see it as a more is it a base for you physically or a base for your capital? And to what extent is it both?
Yeah. So definitely it's a place um, I can see myself spending time. Again, I like affordable living. Um,
Yeah.
when I leave the airport, anywhere I'm at, I stop through the duty free and do a checkpoint on two bottles of alcohol just for a price check of the country.
Mm,
And Paraguay is the cheapest I've seen anywhere in the world. So I'm like, wow, it's amazing. So it is cheap. As for my portfolio, I split my portfolio now. So I have half of my focus is what I would call uh, affordable housing for professionals. So that's like
mm,
my Austin houses and my Arizona houses and my Alaska houses, believe it or not, are for domestic in the US has been for affordable professionals. So I have three houses sitting beside the Tesla Gigafactory here in Austin, with 20,000 workers, and they're all rented to workers. Um, Internationally, my focus has been more for nomads, active couples and semi-retired, newly retired folks that I want to get them onto an easy adventure. So like a single flight somewhere like Cancun or Cabo or Costa Rica or Panama or Madrid or Lisbon. So it's a bit harder So it depends on who your customers are. If it's Asunción, it's a bit harder to get there. So maybe it's a different clientele. They're coming from Brazil and Argentina, which they are because they want to come for the weekends. And that's on the vacation side. So for right now, I'm actually experimenting with workforce housing, affordable housing. As I mentioned, there's a shortage in Asunción, so I am going to invest in those areas. And then for close to shopping and close to World Trade Center, some South American tourists and business people that are coming in. Similarly, in Montevideo in Uruguay, I'm looking at a place right across the street from their World Trade Center, which is beautiful. Um, so yeah, so I guess meandering answer to say I don't know yet. I'm gonna buy a few in different parts of
Yeah.
Asuncion, and then I'm on my next trip, which might be still this year. I'm going to go to the eastern border to Ciudad del Este, which is on the border with Brazil, which is a university town, which is a manufacturing electronics town, and is a place that's is starting to rise as well. But it's more an industrial town right now, and a university town. So I'll know more. I haven't actually been there. I've just read a lot about it and talked to people who've gone there. And then on the south, there's another city, Encarnacion in Paraguay. That is a weekend place. They have Carnival down there. There's a river down there as well. It's a place for weekend tourism, and there's some UNESCO historical sites down there. So
Mm.
there's those are kind of the three big Asuncion, Ciudad del Este, and Encarnacion are the places I think to look at in Paraguay. And the last thing I'll say is, being based in Paraguay, I do want to be able to hop over to Buenos Aires and Santiago and Montevideo. They're all within a 2-hour flight. Those cities I mentioned have very, very, very good medical systems. Paraguay, I think, has affordable day-to-day medical systems and dentists. If you have a serious operation, you'd want to plan, to take a 2-hour flight to one of those other cities, is the guidance I'm getting from people. So just to keep that in mind.
Cool. And so, Kurt, so there's the tax benefits. Oh yeah, the general eating out. Just you've mentioned the
Yeah.
cost of living for the pastry. The white collar worker maybe spend 600 to 900 bucks a month in rent, or that would be. But general cost of living beyond that, eating out is everything really inexpensive?
Yeah, again, depends what currency you're earning, right? Or what you have in your savings account. I think if you have uh, US dollars or euros, even Canadian dollars, maybe. It's pretty affordable in Paraguay. Literally, you can have dinner for a nice dinner for two with lots of protein and steak with wine for certainly under $40,
Yeah.
easily. If you go to the gym, if you want a day pass for an amazing, excellent gym at that mall across the street from Del Sol Shopping, it's $5 for a day pass at an amazing gym. You can go to movies again under $10 US. So I'd say it's quite a bottle of wine, similar to Portugal and Spain. You can spend $3 or $4 for wine. I'm a peanut butter fan. Sounds strange, but I look at peanut butter, which is sometimes very hard to find in some countries, and it's not the natural kind that I like. But in Paraguay, for some reason, they like peanuts, and they've like 20 different kinds of peanut butter, and it's affordable peanut butter, not like $10 a jar peanut butter, but more like $3 a
Yeah.
jar peanut butter. So I appreciate that. So yeah, I love going to the shopping there to the grocery store. It's safe, it's affordable, it's easy to move around town. Um, Again, there's lots of expats. I didn't dig into that, but there's a huge expat community there that continues to grow, where there's probably 30 different WhatsApp groups with different focus areas. If you want to learn about investing, if you want to learn about immigration, if you want to learn about movies, or do social aspects about restaurants, there's a group for everything. And there's meetups multiple nights a week and monthly. So I got to meet some very interesting people from Hungary and all over the world,
Uh,
Australia, and they're telling me they've been there longer than me. They're riding buses for 50 cents. So I've not ridden a bus yet, but apparently for 50 cents, you can, if you want to save, your $2 for your Bolt, and you want to spend 50
mm.
cents, you have that choice as well. Yeah.
And weather?
Yeah, weather is so South America, so opposite to the Northern Hemisphere. It is hot, is what people tell me in the height of summer. My very first trip
Mm,
was in the height of summer, January. I didn't notice it being massively hot because it's dry. I do not
mm,
personally like humidity. That's why I like Cabo. I like, the West Coast. I love Spain. I
mm,
don't I like these drier places rather than Playa del Carmen or Tulum, for
mm.
example, just personally. But it has not been humid there, certainly, and it's been fine weather. I think it gets up in Celsius to 40-ish Celsius, so pretty warm but dry in the summer. But the rest of the year, I think it's pretty reasonable. I was just there kind of just after their winter going into spring. It was, I'm a runner, so I go running every morning. I was wearing
Mm.
shorts and a t-shirt, so I didn't have to wear a parka when I went running. Yeah.
Yeah, very nice. And one last question, and you might not be able to answer this, and I know you're not a tax advisor and all these caveats, but do you know what the minimum time spent in country needs to be to qualify to be tax resident there?
My understanding, we can double check. So I have so Caroline, one of my immigration slash tax people I met down there. She could answer this. I'll ask her, but I believe again you can get your temporary residency quickly with some pre work. Again, I did it in 13 hours, and once you have your temporary residency, now you can apply for that national tax ID or not tax ID, national ID called a cedula, which can take some months. So let's say that takes a few months, but once you have that, you can immediately get a tax ID. So I got a tax ID, and you can choose two different, and you can start earning income and use your tax ID if you're earning local income within, I'd say, within
Yeah,
months.
yeah. I suppose I'm more wondering to be considered tax resident, are you obliged to spend 180 days or 140 days, or are you aware of any conditions like that?
I don't believe there's any. I know that while you have your temporary residency before you apply for your permanent residency, and they're changing the rules a little bit now
Yeah.
and again because again they didn't even have a temporary residency concept and still until lots of people started coming and maybe they wanted to slow things down and make a bit more money in the government. But you need to visit once a year while you're a temporary resident. But basically it's good for 2 years. So 3 months before your 2 year mark, you can apply for your permanent residency. But I think the tax opportunities again start as soon as you have your tax ID, but I'll double check on that. And I don't think there's any minimum time besides once a year in country. Like it's not significant. It's very low, but
Yeah.
I'll double check for you.
Yeah,
So
yeah, because
sorry, Ron.
that I mean the no, no, I mean I didn't mean to put you on the spot. We're talking real estate, not tax. But again, I'm just kind of like all of us, just thinking through my personal situation, and in the past, I've been Portugal resident under the NHR. One of the really, really appealing things of that was that you had to establish a residence there, which could either be owned real estate or rented real estate, but you weren't obliged to spend 140 days there or a number like that to allow yourself to be considered tax resident there. Lots of places that come with very, very interesting tax benefits. You're going to need to spend as much as 180 days a year there to really benefit from those. So it's really enticing when places pop up that allow you tax residency, that allow you those benefits without mandating that you spend half the time there. And then, when we're mobile, we can put together lives with a fiscal and tax base in a very low tax jurisdiction, and then just make sure we don't overstay whatever the criteria are in our other bases that would trigger or imply that we're tax resident there. Um, so, Kurt, listen, Thank you so much. I feel like I'm going to come off this, and it's coming into the evening time here, and I'm going to wake up in the morning with 15 or 20 more questions for you. It certainly sounds extremely interesting. It reminds me so much of what you spoke about, reminds me of Brazil, parts of Brazil around Fortaleza in the kind of 2007, 2008, and 2009 window. And that's very, very interesting. That was the early days of RETA, and we did extremely well from that part of Brazil, for a window of time. And we did extremely
Mm.
well from flipping condos during that time. We were buying, kind of similar price sub $100,000 two-bed, two-bath condos. They were increasing by 60 to 80% during construction. There was a really strong local market, so it was really possible and achievable to flip and flip and flip. And all the caveats, I don't recommend flipping, like only flip if and when you can, but it's really not advisable to go into a deal and expecting or having to flip, because
Right.
you just hit a moment, as you know well, of low liquidity. But also with the low down payments back in Brazil back then, the way the payments worked was 1% down and 1% per month for a
Oh,
period
wow. Hmm.
with an inflation adjustment. And then those down payments came up a bit, but only to kind of 5 and 10%. So it was super highly leveraged in that first year, and very, very hot flipping market,
Mm.
which you're into a deal for 10% and it's selling for 30% more. I mean, those are
Yeah.
with very low transaction costs, very low costs, and very low broker fees. So lots of food for thought. It
Yeah.
really
I,
get gets me thinking if this could be a place for the totally inadvisable. Just don't do it. But I might go down there and start seeing about flipping condos. Have you
yeah.
thought
And
about that flip play?
yes, yes, I have. And yes. So short answer, yes. Again, I like a generally a portfolio play, so I'm fine. I'm interested in doing that. Yes, and I'm looking at that in a few different markets. Interesting that you did mention Fortaleza because I was in South America for most of the month of August. I did stop in for my first time outside of airport trip in Brazil, and I spent a
Mm,
few days in the Amazon, but then I did spend several days in Fortaleza area and down the coast. I was very impressed, actually, and now they just are allowing higher buildings. They were capped at around 22 floors, and now they've just greenlit over doubling that. So, and there's like 10 or 12 new construction projects about to break ground, but they're all selling out, but they're not selling at the prices you were paying, 10 or 15 years ago, Ronan. They're $1 million places now. Right across the beach in Fortaleza, but beautiful
yeah,
place. And of course, all the domestic tourism is massive there. So I
yeah,
liked that. And then Uruguay is quite interesting. I think Uruguay is quite interesting.
yeah. And they're such different beasts. I mean, you Paraguay, and I feel parallels with parts of Brazil, albeit Brazil and Fortaleza is maybe more affluent and maybe more advanced and developed, and then Uruguay is its own particular thing. But I think it's a very interesting moment on all fronts. I'm personally very interested again in Northeast Brazil. I still have some real estate there. I still have some land. What I ultimately did up there was I flipped a bunch of condos, and then towards the end, some of them I traded for land. I traded one for a parking lot of Praia do Futuro, which I sold last year. and I traded some others into a multi-unit kind of building that is in an area that now is going very high rise vertical. So I own that with a partner, and we're exploring kind of rolling it again into a high rise project. So I flipped the condos for what essentially is land with maybe some kind of low income housing on it. And next
Hmm.
we'll flip that land into a high rise condo deal by giving the land to the project and taking condos in return. Um,
Mm,
so
yeah,
interesting time, and getting particularly interesting when just those price points on a global perspective are so low compared to
right.
what's happened in so many places.
Yeah. And I agree with all of that. And I was learning a bit about the tax residence and residency benefits and differences of Paraguay versus Brazil, for example. You basically don't want to get a passport in Brazil because of tax treaties that don't exist and things like that. At least that's my rudimentary understanding. But that is a reason I like Paraguay. But next time we can talk about some other affordable places I'm scouting. Looking at Indonesia, so Bali, and then Chiang Mai, Thailand, and Da Nang, Vietnam, and then Kyoto's in the mix. It's clearly not the same price point as the three I mentioned before it, but I think there's some interesting stuff like $230,000, really nice two-bedroom places in Bali that are 2 blocks to the
Wow.
beach. It's harder to get there. It's maybe not for North
Yeah.
Americans. It's not an
D-
easy
d-
adventure for sure, but yeah,
it depends on where you start from. As Owen
exactly.
likes to say, how would you get there? It depends on where you start from. Listen, Kurt, yeah, maybe we'll leave it there, and really looking. Thanks for your time. Thanks for being so gracious and generous with your time. And
You're
I'd
welcome.
love to pick up on some of these ideas again. Very interested in Northeast Brazil, very interested in Uruguay, as you know, would be interested to hear your take. Interested to hear how the Paraguay story evolves, and then also your Asian adventures.
All right, I'll get you a bit more data on Paraguay with some of my contacts, so we can let the reader members know the answers. So thanks, Ronan. I appreciate your time.
Great stuff. Thanks so much,
All
Kurt.
right, all right.
See
Take
ya.
care. See you. Bye.